أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. There's no strength and no power except from the Creator alone. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Sultanallah, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Today's class is pretty much a continuation of the last class we had, and it's just going to probably overlap some stuff that needs to be emphasized and other stuff, hopefully, that we didn't cover that needs to be covered. Talking more about the kind of fundamentals of the hijama and the differences between hijama and cupping, and those differences are highlighted, and some of you already turned in your assignment for looking in the internet and finding the most egregious examples of bad, cupping practices. So you're pretty much primed for this class because you probably have already seen some videos that are pretty horrific. And those practices run the gamut of again, this pump action is probably the biggest culprit. And, technically you might be able to use the pump action properly if you control the amount of pressure that you put on the actual spot that you're cupping and kept it from exceeding the amount of pressure that would be created from the heat that is done with the fire cupping method. But people don't do that. They have different size pumps, and so you can't say that, don't exceed 3 pumps on the actual hand pump, because the size or diameter of the actual pump varies depending on the manufacturer of that pump. And consistently, if you're looking on the internet, you see that people are overextending, and the skin that is raised inside the cup as a result of the excess pressure that is being exerted on that spot is huge, and you can see the skin being pulled way back. And if you're somewhat respectful of that and careful, you might get away with using the plastic cups. But there's more to it than just the plastic cups alone. Anybody who's reusing the plastic cups is, doing something that is terribly wrong. Most people are throwing away and disposing of those cups. There's actually glass cups that have this pump action associated with them as well, too. And they were being utilized before they came up with the plastic. And, they wouldn't want to throw those away because they were quite expensive. So people were sterilizing them, but the rubber on top and the indentations inside the actual cup and how they're constructed lent to a lot of, buildup of potentially blood accumulating in those areas. So even sterilization, I don't think was, sufficient to get rid of, all the potential, blood-borne disease or problems that might be associated with that. If you put them in a dishwasher and got it up to a temperature which was good enough to sterilize or, at least kill all the blood-borne disease, then, that might do the trick. But you couldn't do that because most of those rubber things would then melt, and then they become disfigured, and the pumping action wouldn't work. So there were a lot of problems associated with that, and, whether or not people are reusing these cups or not, and whether they regulate the actual, pump action on the cups is, something that you could be careful and try to, incorporate that into your practice. But I firmly believe that there's something to the fire itself, that the property of fire has benefits that we don't even understand. Not just as a sterilant on the actual spot, because you're putting fire there that assists in anything that might be, bacterial-wise inside the cup would be, partially eradicated by the fire itself. But the higher property, the spiritual property of fire, and what benefit that has on a spiritual level when you're, talking about seer or black magic or jinn or any of those things, what does that process contribute to the actual cupping? I list quite a few studies, and I'll probably try to list, quite a few more by the time that this, class is up. I'll probably continue putting more over the next couple of days, so come back and take a look at that. But these studies, of course, are, controlled trials, and they're trying to legitimize cupping or disprove cupping, depending on the motivation of the people funding the study. But they, all pretty much now conclude that, there's no real strong evidence that cupping, will have a positive effect on most diseases. They admit that it has some benefit with herpes, and they have benefit with pain management and a few minor areas that they discuss and talk about that may receive benefit from the cupping. Go ahead and take a look at those studies. For the Muslims taking this class, and for the Muslims who have belief in, the ijaaza process and the isnad going back, we know that these things have been passed down, and we know that the knowledge has been preserved. So it does go back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, and we understand that what he said is infallible, that what he said is, precise. So if he's telling us that Hijama is a cure for all illness, then, we accept that fully. We don't need the studies, and we don't need the trials, and we don't need the evidentiary, proof that this works, because we've already been told by the most reliable source that exists, and we don't need anything else. So much of healing that we started with this class, we discussed that, the healing doesn't come from the cupping process. It doesn't come from the cupper, the practitioner. It doesn't come from the pills that you take. It doesn't even come from the herbs that you brew and drink and effectuate for different ailments and different conditions. Every single cure comes from God alone. So we have to acknowledge this and understand this, that this is, the conduit that is prescribed for allowing the healing process to happen. But again, all cures and all, healing methods come from the Creator alone. You can literally, and I've seen examples of this, people with high blood pressure come and, a great sheikh or teacher will give them a spoonful of salt and tell them to take it. And it's the obedience of taking that salt that ended up acting as a cure for that person. And the next day they threw away their pills and they didn't need them. I don't recommend this, of course. It's basically a miracle that happened that allows that to take place. But it was utilized at different times to illustrate, that the healing doesn't come from a source that you would expect. And certainly the salt is counterproductive to high blood pressure. So by giving them the salt, it made it, manifest clear that the healing came from something else other than, the substance that was being taken. So it gets back into the discussion of the placebo effect, and it gets back into the discussion of Masaru Emoto's water crystals, that you put the intention on these, bottles of water, and the crystal appearance and actually transforms and change, and the matter changes. So we go back to that and remind ourselves again that the healing is from the Creator. But, with that said, there's proper procedures, of course, and proper things that have been prescribed over the years, that if you have good manners and you respect those things too, it's really upping your belief in the Creator and His ability to heal, because you're respecting those things that were prescribed by people that, are on a level of belief that are just prescribing what has been ordered. So it's interesting to consider all these things when you're talking about a healing process. The cupping, again, I wanted to point out that fire property itself, I think, has a profound effect on the overall healing process. Not only does it regulate the amount of suction that can be extracted, that you can't overcup, so to speak, but it provides that property of fire that also acts as a sterilant. And I believe very strongly that it does have other spiritual and physical benefits to it that we don't fully understand. So, the trend is absolutely 100% geared towards using these plastic cups. And of course it's, popular because it's easy. And really most of these people using these cups have never even used the fire method, or tried it once or twice and failed, and are concerned that, they might burn the patient or do something that will upset the process. So they run towards these plastic cups and different processes that make the client or the patient happy. But making clients and patients happy is not what healing is about. If you could give everybody a sugar pill and it would cure them, then you'd probably have an incredibly, wealthy practice, because people would come from all corners of the earth to get a cure with that sugar pill. But as we often understand and know, that most medicine is bitter and tastes, terrible. And it's, wisdom that is behind that bitter taste that is actually effectuating the cure and helping you. It's kind of a no pain, no gain philosophy. So, the best things are oftentimes the worst treatments that we have to endure. And I'm talking strictly about natural medicine. I'm not talking about chemotherapy and stuff. That's a completely different subject. But in the category of natural healing, which I also listed the Natural Healing book for all of you to take a look at. See that that's an invaluable source and reference material for you. I know a lot of you may or may not have experience with the natural medicine field, but most of you do, because you wouldn't be involved in this if you weren't interested in those kinds of things. To the extent that you incorporate that into your practice is, entirely up to you. I mean, you can just specifically, as an ijaaza practitioner, you're going to get all sorts of people coming to you for all sorts of, problems that you may have, and you should know and understand your own limitations and not go beyond those limitations. So if you don't know anything about natural medicine, this book will certainly help you quite a bit, and you can just reference it by going to the ailment that is in the book and prescribe it. It's quite easy to prescribe. And the ailments that are being described in that book are very easily diagnosed, so it's not something that is going to be difficult for people to understand that, you have this problem or that problem. But you do have to be careful and understand that you're not a doctor, and you must always recommend to people that are coming to see you that they should continue going to see, medical personnel, and they should continue and not leave off their medications and things of that nature, if for no other reason than, pure liability, that you're going to get yourself into an enormous amount of trouble. It's probably a good time to mention and talk a little bit about that aspect of this, that the Hijama industry, like the mohel for the Jewish circumcision process, mohels go into, major hospitals and are welcomed by doctors to perform what is a surgical procedure, but it's not viewed as a surgical procedure, not either by the Jewish faith or by even the doctors. It's viewed as a religious practice. And because it's a religious practice, these mohels are exempt from receiving a medical training or medical degree that then permits them to go in and perform, again, what is effectively a surgical procedure of removing the foreskin from a male child. And the strange habit that many of them still perform, and it's accepted because, again, it's a religious practice, is that many of these mohels, it's recommended or required, I guess, depending on who you talk to, that you actually put your mouth on the penis and suck part of the blood off of the penis as part of the practice of the circumcision. I'm not sure of the logic or the reasoning behind why they're doing that, but many of them still practice that, and many of them are getting, different questions about that, and the cleanliness, of course, and the hygiene associated with putting your mouth on an open wound like that. But I won't, argue the pros and cons of that. But what I will say is that something that kind of radical and that clearly unhygienic is being accepted by the medical field and respected, because the Jewish people and the mohels and the rabbis all respect it. And what has happened in the Muslim world, and this is, strong criticism on our Muslim brothers and sisters, that you don't respect these things, then nobody else is going to respect them either. And the way that people are approaching Hijama, and the way that they are getting their training, and the manner in which they, get their education and going on the internet and just, going to these certificate mills and getting a certificate, doesn't legitimize the argument that this is a religious practice. And in fact, most of these people are trying to legitimize what they do by making it a certification, unionized industry that allows them to continue to practice in a Western environment. So they want the licensing that an acupuncturist has, and they want the licensing that a massage therapist has, and they want the licensing that a sports medicine person has, because they don't have, and probably in many cases can't achieve, an ijaaza, because they wouldn't make it through the process. So they circumvent it, and they're really throwing the religion behind their backs in this, false claim of upholding the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, Sunnah being the example and the ways of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a complete lie. And they will stand before Judgment Day, and they'll be asked, what did you do in your life? And they'll proudly, say that I protected the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, and they'll be told, no, you did not. You did it to be seen by men, and you did it to make money, and you did it to, please your mother, making her think that you're a doctor. And it's just absolute tragedy what is happening. I've been practicing for, well over 15 years, performing hijama, and it was only until recently that I even had permission to start teaching. And there's got to be some sort of wisdom behind that, because there's been no ijaaza teacher really that has been out there. And we've been getting, just huge amounts of, false information, and these certificate mills popping up everywhere, and everybody claiming to be hijama practitioners now. And, if you want to be a cupping practitioner and you want to do things which are not prescribed by Prophet Muhammad, then call yourself a cupping practitioner. Don't call yourself a hijama practitioner. And one of the requests today in the homework assignment is for you to register with Wikipedia, and to begin to utilize the education now that you're receiving and the understanding that you're getting, and become advocates on that site, because that site probably reaches more people than any other site, which disseminating knowledge about not only the cupping therapy but also hijama. And they have it separated now, that hijama is on one page and described differently, which is a horrible description on there. And then you have the cupping therapy, which is also just full of inaccuracies. So we really need some people that are educated, that are qualified to really even be talking about this. And I would think that after you're done with this course, you're probably more qualified than, 99% of the people out there right now. So take that knowledge and please go and be an advocate, and write, different things that you can incorporate into those descriptions on the Wikipedia. There should be a better link on, Wikipedia for the cupping therapy and the hijama therapy. And there's virtually no discussion about ijaaza or isnad or, any of those things. And anytime you do it, it then becomes this democracy of will. And if you have a large percentage of people that just want to disrupt the site, they can easily maintain control of that site. So we need to kind of change that balance over and try to get a larger percentage of people that know what they're talking about to fight for what is correct. So I would encourage you to do that and take on that task and continue being vigilant with it. So, So the industry has been destroyed by the hijama. People claiming to be doing hijama when they're absolutely not doing hijama. And it is something that will eventually cause governments to crack down on the people claiming this religious exemption for hijama, because it'll be apparent that most of them are running after certification anyway. And if they accept certification, then they're basically saying that they don't accept the religious exemption. You can operate entirely on the religious exemption in the same manner that the mohels do, but they respect what they're doing, and they have a very clear system of training and very well organized method of now incorporating hygienic practices into what they're doing, and surgical procedures. And they get a pretty good training before they're allowed to go out and start calling themselves a mohel. Very much unlike the hijama people, who are, learning on their own and making all sorts of claims, and they have no imam even, that's telling them that they're qualified to do this. So they completely ignore the ijaaza and isnad system and go out and do whatever they want to do. Mark my words, this will absolutely destroy any chance of the religious exemption in the future. It will hurt the Jewish people as well, who will then, have to explain why their exemption is still worthy. So the Muslims that are doing this are doing an extremely horrible disservice to Islamic thought and Islamic sciences. So, really shame on them. It's something that's just terrible. But, also you have cupping people that are running after a new marketing opportunity that are doing all sorts of things too, which are extremely counterproductive. There's, again, some other videos that are on the website, or the web page for the class, today's class. And Michael Phelps, with the red marks all over his back, which of course is seen when he was competing for the Olympic trials, is just made cupping explode in its popularity. So you have different movie stars that come out on the red carpet and they have their red marks on their back, and you have different Olympian athletes who have done it, a lot of them from China, but they didn't receive the same kind of attention that Michael Phelps brought to it. Once he, showed that he incorporates this into his life in order to, the claims are that it's for pain management and whatnot, but I would argue that done properly, it would have maybe 10 times the benefit that it has in the manner in which it's being utilized now. So he's, getting it done by the sports medicine person who you can be sure didn't even hear of cupping 5 years ago, but is, looking for new things that, her clients will respect. I'm going to say her because it was a woman who's doing it to Michael Phelps, as far as I can see from the videos. And she, of course, incorporates it into her practice because it's something new, something, that's popular and something that, her clients can be sold on. So she makes more money, and she's seen as somebody who's progressive and somebody who's, on the forefront of new therapies and techniques. And it ups her reputation and helps her to, convince others that she's one of the best sports medicine people out there. And we all understand, the desire to want to be excelling in your field. But the way these people incorporate these things into their practices is based, again, mostly on client approval. They have an extremely hard time convincing their clients to extract the blood, especially if somebody's, in the pool 12, 13, 14 hours a day. It's not going to be very hygienic, or, it can be a serious problem if infection results from, cutting the skin and then jumping in the pool and swimming for 12 hours a day. Just the exposure to the chlorine for that long a period of time on those cuts could cause all sorts of problems. But it's, still something that should be incorporated, and, you just keep the person out of the pool for a day, which in many cases these Olympians, that are training with such a high rate would never want to give up a day to do it. So I understand the pressures that keep people from recommending, the cutting of the skin and allowing the blood to come out to those clients. And I'm sure the sports medicine people understand it better than I do. But it doesn't matter. You're not here marketing and selling people on modalities of natural medicine to increase your pocketbook. I mean, if that's your goal and that's what you're doing, then you're a charlatan, you're a fraud, and you're just taking advantage of people. You're nothing better than the snake oil salesman of, yesteryear, who, gave you a concoction with quite a bit of alcohol. Sometimes, even cocaine was put into these concoctions and all sorts of other elixirs. and you know, it made you feel really good. And if a placebo can have an effect on your body, then certainly a little alcohol and spirits, you know, that does have clearly a physical effect on your body is going to make you believe that this elixir, this concoction is working to heal you, and it will heal you, because again, all healing comes from the Creator. So, you know, were these guys really charlatans, or were they, you know, selling belief in something that actually did make people feel better? Well, there's no question it made people feel better, and that's how they were able to continue selling different things. Not only from a placebo effect, but from a direct effect of the ingredients that were in these elixirs. So, you know, just the act of putting cups on people and making them believe that something beneficial is going to happen has a positive effect in and of itself. So we can't ignore that. But you have to understand also what is better and what is best as far as practices are concerned. And if you're recommending something that is not the best, then you should reconsider what you're doing and why you're doing it. The act of putting the cups on people and extracting and drawing blood to a spot on the back, especially where there's pain or muscle ache, I have absolutely no doubt that there's immediate benefit that you experience and feel, and that the muscle affected by the strain of an injury is treated very quickly and receives benefit from the blood being moved around in that area and even brought forward to that area. But the long-term impact and the long-term effects of that can be, you know, quite a problem when you're not extracting the dead blood that is coming out. And this is one of the biggest problems that probably occur, that people don't understand that there is literally a separation in this process of Hijama where dead blood is extracted. And if there was one study that should be done, I think should be an analysis between blood that's drawn by needle and blood that is extracted by Hijama process or cupping process, wet cupping process. And I would, you know, like to see those studies, whether those studies would be looking in the right direction or whether they, you know, could isolate and identify what this means by dead blood, whether there's a abnormality to the actual cells that are being extracted that can even be seen under a microscope, is all questions that, you know, would remain even if they didn't find anything different in the blood that was extracted from a needle versus the blood that was extracted from the cupping process. So, you know, I wouldn't rely on it, and I still go back to, you know, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the example and the manner in which he told us to do this is best, and it's not necessary to question that. But people do question these things, and, you know, it is of interest if you could find a, you know, substantial difference between the blood that is extracted from Hijama. It certainly would prove this, and it would eliminate all the arguments against you don't really need to do this. But my contention is that if Michael Phelps, you know, came to me and did the Hijama properly over the course of the spring and fall, as a matter of a preventative or a you know, a scheduled procedure, and not simply for pain management. And you could still use it for pain management, but, you know, you would still need to extract some blood to get rid of the dead blood that's being drawn from that affected area. But as a general course of increasing athletes' endurance, or anybody's endurance for that matter, over time, you're effectively cleaning out like a radiator in a car. Those of you that are mechanically inclined, or those that understand the process, that the gook starts building up into the radiator. And when the gook starts building up in the radiator, the car has a hard time cooling down. And the heat starts building up. And when the heat becomes too much of a problem, you get all sorts of problems. Ideally, the radiator is going to, overflow, and the pressure valve is going to pop, and nothing will actually happen because the car will be forced to stop, and they'll have to cool down because of that. But if you continue going with a radiator that's like that over long periods of time, or you just ignore the warning signs, and you allow the car to remain running at a high temperature like that, you can crack the engine block. You can, do all sorts of irreversible problems to the car. So similarly, with the, human body, you have gunk that is being, it's a technical term, very medical term, gunk, which builds up into the cardiovascular system. And with the advent of, these glyphosates and GMO food products and RGB in the milk, and, the chemicals and pesticides and the garbage that we put into our bodies, is just unbelievable now. Along with air pollution and, water pollution and everything else, our bodies are just, more full of gunk than they've ever been in history. And how do you get that gunk out? I mean, get that gunk out with proper diet. You can get it out with exercise. But a proper course of, Hijama at least once a year, or twice a year if you're having, more severe problems, will get that gunk out of your system. And that gunk is what is contributing to all the illness. So when you say that Hijama is a cure for all disease and all illness, it's quite correct. And it's correct because it's opening up the cardiovascular system and allowing it to have more oxygen. And oxygen is what is healing. So when you get rid of that gunk and you get rid of that radiator clogging, the system is now working properly, and everything's cooling and everything's, very happy. But the minute you get, too much gunk in there, then you're going to have problems. Now, again, there's a spiritual component to this cleanliness of the cardiovascular system as well, which I, certainly do believe in, and, have complete faith that is even probably a more important component in some regards than the actual physical cleansing of the body. But alone, the physical benefits are enough to make it clear to understand that if you remove that gunk from the body's going to be able to oxygenate, and when it oxygenates and operates properly, it heals, and it heals at a very rapid rate. So when you leave this, blood under the skin and you don't remove it, I do believe that you do get some benefits, especially with pain management, but from like a blood doping, it's almost a blood doping benefit process, that instead of, putting chemicals in your body to try to increase the rate of blood in your system, it's not the blood in your system so much as it's the increased capacity to oxygenate, because you have more blood cells to oxygenate. If you did the reverse and you took out the blood that is gunking up the system and you allowed more oxygen in that way, it's the benefit of the oxygen, not the increased amount of blood from the doping, that causes the athlete to experience superhuman, qualities, or puts 2 seconds more off of their, lap time, or, a bicycle rider, doing the the race, in record time. And it does, it works. But I submit to people that the process of doing this hijama would have a much higher positive effect than blood doping has, and of course it would be legal. There's absolutely nothing illegal about cleaning your cardiovascular system. You're not adding anything to it. So all you athletes out there that, are thinking that cupping is the next best thing since sliced bread, and who are utilizing it to try to gain the edge, and utilizing it to get yourselves, back in the pool to be able to swim more laps and relieve the pain, you're missing the plot. You really missed the major benefits of this. So it's my hope that I reach actually more, acupuncturists and massage therapists and sports medicine people, because I believe their intentions are very sincere. They do want to help people, but they really need to be educated in this area. And acupuncturists are probably the best qualified to be doing cupping from a medical standpoint. What the correlation is between acupuncture points, meridian points, and the actual points to do cupping, because cupping is more cardiovascular related, is a question I can't answer, and I wouldn't pretend to try to answer. I do believe that there is a correlation between the two, and I do believe they're highly complementary of each other. And I do believe that acupuncturists are well suited, based on the amount of training that they do have, and understanding of the physiological, makeup of the human body. They are, well suited for doing cupping. But they need to incorporate the proper procedures of hijama into their practice in order to really effectuate, good health in people. So they absolutely can't leave off the, wet cupping techniques, and they should absolutely respect the amount of blood that they're taking out of people's bodies, and they should absolutely respect the use of fire cups and glass cups. And if they, did that, they would be much better off in helping and assisting their clients. So it's my hope that many of the acupuncturists out there, and massage therapists, chiropractors, sports medicine people are going to absolutely sign up for this class and incorporate these, key points into their practices. So if they don't, entirely believe in, hijama or the methodology or sayings of Prophet Muhammad and stuff, that's fine. But there are key points that they should respect and certainly abide by. So we're hoping very much that they do that. Not everybody's going to be an ijaaza, practitioner, just like everybody's not going to be a mohel. There are surgeons who are, of course, quite capable of doing a circumcision, but most of your mohels will tell you that they lack the spiritual, religious training, and that there's a covenant with God that is not fulfilled unless a Jewish rabbi is actually performing the service. So a non-Jewish, surgeon who's performing the circumcision, especially if it's not done in the procedural time and the manner that it's supposed to be done, it's not accepted. And then you have to go back and you have to have a rabbi just prick the same area and get a little blood out of it to reenact it, to get the spiritual blessings and power and covenant, fulfill that covenant. So, I'm not going to get into a huge conversation about that, but there is definitely a religious aspect to the hijama that needs to be, at least acknowledged and understood. And I don't expect cupping, practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, etc., to abide by all of that. And I certainly don't want to make the claim that they have no business, incorporating this kind of stuff into their practice. There's plenty of reason why they should be doing it if they're doing it properly. Because not everybody wants, a Muslim practitioner to be their, practitioner. So everybody should be able to, choose and go to who they want. But it's still important to understand that there's, standard practices that should be abided by. And that's what we're hoping for. That those, important aspects of hijama are understood by everybody and incorporated into these practices. So, got a phone call coming in here. Just turn that off. Hopefully they don't call back. Disrupted my flow of thought a little bit. Respect the things that hijama has to offer that you, hopefully will understand from having taken this course. And if you do, you'll find out that, it will end up helping your patients a lot more, especially in the case of these athletes that are trying to use it. And I would love to, I pioneered the cupping on animals, and you're seeing more and more of that, and you'll see a lot more of it in the future. But I can guarantee you, if you took racing dogs, greyhounds, or you took thoroughbreds racing horses, and you did a controlled study and had 10 of them do hijama twice a year in spring and fall, and had 10 of the dogs and 10 of the horses, and you compared them against a control group, and also measured, their times before you did the cupping and after you did the cupping, I can pretty much guarantee you that would reflect a much better time trial in those animals that received the cupping. And I would suggest over many years, too, that the amount of injury that occurred to them after the cupping. So cupping is often, used as something that happens after disease or after injury. And that's really the wrong thinking. The best time for cupping is to use it as a preventative care procedure, and to have people come in spring and fall, and any time during the summer months is ideal too. And do it during those optimal times for the people. And it prevents injury, and it prevents problems in the cardiovascular system, and it prevents all sorts of disease because, again, you're oxygenating the entire system. So injury, is not so likely to occur in the people that are receiving the hijama over long periods of time, who are cleansing their system on a regular basis. Most people don't need hijama until after 30, age 30, predominantly for sexually active people that, are getting a bit older, and then the cardiovascular system starts bogging down. It's, the time where you start feeling it a little bit, that you're outside of your peak athletic years. And, most baseball players, hockey players, and whatnot start to go downhill after 30. And there's a reason for that. And that's when the benefits of hijama really become important and necessary. Women are less, in need of hijama than men are, because their monthly cycle actually acts as a substitute for the hijama, that the dead blood is extracted from that process. So they, in many cases, if not, suffering from particular ailments like high blood pressure and things of that nature, don't need it until after menopause. After the menopause, then it becomes much more important for them to incorporate that once a year, twice a year into their lifestyle. Children should generally never be cupped. And these horrible, pictures of children with multiple cups all over their bodies, with these practitioners making all sorts of promises to the parents that will cure this and do that, is primarily not, a practice that you should be doing for most ailments in most children. The epilepsy, if a child was suffering from epilepsy, I certainly would do it on them then because it has a tremendous benefit for epileptic problems. And other ailments are on a kind of case-to-case basis, and of course, if they're really suffering, but, in disease in children used to be almost, non-existent, and we're not, years ago you just didn't see it. So this is kind of a new phenomenon that you're seeing more disease in children now. So to the extent that, a child is suffering from something, you can incorporate the hijama in your practice to help them, but be very conservative in how many cups you put on and how much blood you're drawing out, and by all means don't use the pump action, use the fire method in the glass cups, and you should try it out, one or two spots on the back and see how it responds. And if it, has no negative effect on the child, then, the following session you can maybe do a little bit more. But again, you should never do it more than twice a year. And as a rule, you shouldn't do it more than once a year for people that are healthy. So, we probably didn't cover a huge amount of things that I was intending on covering today. But it's really something that will be left for your practical experience, and I'll give you a bit of a reminder what's going to happen. If you complete this course and, it seems like you're somebody who can go on as a candidate who would receive ijaaza training, then you'll be invited to the Hijama Intensive, which is just a 7-day program. It's really kind of a condensed spiritual retreat, and it's designed to get to know you better, to actually be in your company. So, because this, process of me sitting here lecturing to you doesn't really help me get to know you. Your essays and feedback and stuff have been marvelous, and giving some insights into who you are, and I really appreciate your efforts in making those so good. But there's nothing like sitting in an environment with somebody, an intensive retreat kind of situation. In 7 days, you can really get to know one another. So that's really the purpose of that exercise, is not to teach you about Hijama, but to get to know you. And for you to get to know me too, of course. And then, if you get through that process, then you'll be continuing under our wing, so to speak, and there'll be absolutely no fees or charges associated with it. And you'll come and you'll actually learn side by side with people that are, proficient in this practice. So what I, recommend that you come for, 3, 4, 5 sessions, and a session would be, several days of optimal, odd, or rather, last half of the lunar calendar days in the summertime. So if you can schedule that, you can do it, 1 month after another month. And what I like to see is 2 sessions with myself, and then 2 sessions or 1 session each with another practitioner. And those practitioners probably at this stage of the game will not be ijaaza qualified practitioners for teaching purposes, but they may have gotten usually permission from other teachers and are qualified to practice it at least. But you can go and observe and see, what they do, and even if they may not be in complete agreement with what we're doing, you'll at least, have a comparison to be able to judge and understand the differences that, maybe they're doing in their practice versus what I'm talking about. One person I have in mind that probably be a good candidate for that is also an acupuncturist. So you get the exposure to the acupuncture, experience as well. So that would be somebody, and he's in the Northern Virginia area up near Washington. So if you can go, and spend a couple sessions with him. And then it's very much individual who, gets the ijaaza and who doesn't. But you can go on to, continue doing your cupping and offering cupping services. Nobody can regulate or, control or tell you what to do there. But to be certified specifically as an ijaaza candidate for the Hijama would be something different. And that's kind of the track that we'll be on if you continue. So I want to thank you again. But all to say that, don't worry about that we're not covering too much of the practical, and that there's a lot of other, anecdotal things that, you should understand, and practices that you should incorporate into your own bag of tricks that we're not covering here. That's not really the focus of this program. The focus of this program, again, is to identify people that are ijaaza quality people. So, thank you. We'll see you next class. Assalamu alaikum. شكرا.